short meditation and then the prayers. My person's coming. Yes. Okay. All right. So let's take a moment. Remember sentient beings. Remember that they are basically a part of us. That they've been extremely kind to us in past lives. But even in this life, we couldn't survive without other sentient beings. Humans and animals alike. Our worldly happiness is dependent on others. And so is our spiritual well-being. And despite all their mental afflictions, their faults, they all have the potential to attain the state of a Buddha. Since their afflictions are not in the nature of their mind. Based on that, let's generate great compassion, a loving attitude that not only wishes for all sentient beings to be free from all their faults and limitations, also wishes to protect them, to help them overcome these faults and limitations. And this mind then grows stronger, gives way to the altruistic resolve that is now determined to do whatever we can to help sentient beings overcome all their faults and limitations. since we can realistically only do so if we first attain the enlightened state of Buddha ourselves, let's generate the mind of enlightenment. A sincere aspiration to actualize our fullest potential in the form of Buddhahood for the benefit of every sentient being. So with this in mind, let's recite the prayers. Until enlightenment, I go for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merits of listening to the teachings, may I achieve Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Until enlightenment, I go for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merits of listening to the teachings, may I achieve Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Until enlightenment, I go for refuge to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merits of listening to the teachings, may I achieve Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings never be separated from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment and anger that holds some close and others distant. All right. I guess most of you've seen the explanation, like of the brief summary of what we did last time. Okay. So those of you who don't use WhatsApp, I think eventually they'll also be on the website. So there's not much to add to it, but I want to stress again, first of all, well, a few things I kind of changed. The illustration is now a flower, it's not a plant any longer. Anyway, that's minor. But I also added the fact that this way of looking at things, that they first come into existence, then they remain for some time, and eventually they go out of existence, is really from the point of view of worldly beings. It's not incorrect. It's not incorrect, but what worldly beings, I had a hard time finding a good term. It's really like those not familiar with this kind of philosophy. We have a tendency to simplify things, and not just that, to focus on just one aspect. Just focus on one and neglect the rest. Because when we look at a flower, for instance, when it has newly arisen, at that time it's disintegrating and it's abiding, it's there, and it's disintegrating. Abiding is a weird word, but it's the best we have, I think. Remaining is weird, dwelling is weirder, staying doesn't. Yeah, so abiding in like, not like I abide the person, like I can stand that person, or I don't know, I think that's what it means, right? I like that person. Or abide by the rules, I keep the rules, but abiding as in just remaining, staying for some time. So therefore, when something has arisen, at the same time, it's there, it abides, and it's disintegrating. Now, someone wrote they had a hard time with the fact that something is abiding and disintegrating, suggesting those two are contradictory. And it seems contradictory, like either it's there or it's disintegrating, right? Either it's there or it's ceasing, kind of idea. But I guess because in English we're not that, or in other languages we're not that consistent when it comes to using those two words. Sometimes we use the present, sometimes we use the past. So it seems whether it's disintegrating or disintegrated, kind of same thing. But disintegrated, or having ceased, actually means gone, right? If something has ceased, it has ceased to exist. And this process, or having ceased, being past tense, it must be preceded by the present tense, right? There must have been a time when that particular thing was ceasing. And so when is that? For instance, the flower, as it exists, yeah, it's weird to say it's ceasing. It's disintegrating. We don't think of it that way. But when it's no longer there, the moment it's gone, it has disintegrated. So to say this process of having disintegrated was preceded by disintegrating, well, then when was that? It could have only been at the time when the flower was still there. It was slowly going out of existence, in other words. And so I added this little, well, it's not even a paragraph, I think it's 2 sentences based on someone's message here. It's like you wouldn't say we're dying. We're dying. I mean, some put it that way, honestly, in the teachings, but we're moving towards our own death. The moment we were born, we were racing towards our own death, right? Every day our life getting shorter, us getting closer to our own death. That's like disintegrating. Moving towards our own death. That's like disintegrating. And then death itself is like we've disintegrated. Death and after death. So death is the moment when our consciousness leaves this body. Then we're no longer existing in that form, so we have disintegrated. Makes sense, doesn't it? So we like to be a little bit more positive about this. We may not say we're moving towards our own death. We may we may put it in different words, but still, we may articulate it in a different way. But it's still not wrong. It's true, isn't it? And of course, also what Alan said last time, it's impermanent. It's made of sub-moments. Every moment is subdivided into its own moments, and they're changing all the time. So disintegrating, also moving closer to its own destruction. Therefore, we say that which has arisen is also disintegrating. And it's there, so it's abiding. So in relation, it's all relative, right? It's all relative and it's all merely labeled. So in relation to the fact that it's there, we say it's abiding. In relation to the fact that this process of arising that happened during the course of, let's say, the flower, that has been completed. Now there's no longer any arising. It has arisen, it's there. So in relation to that, we label it has arisen. And in relation to the fact that it's moving close to its own non-existence, we say it is disintegrating. I mean, in the end, it's just labeled. We just apply these terms on the basis or in relation to other things, to certain situations. I mean, you don't label in relation to the same thing that has arisen and it's abiding. That would be contradictory, right? To say it is abiding or it is disintegrating, let's put it that way. It's disintegrating in relation to X, Y, and Z, and it's also abiding in relation to X, Y, and Z. Doesn't make sense, right? It is disintegrating in relation to a later moment when it's gone, since that process of having disintegrated was not reached yet, we say it's disintegrating, right? In relation to that. In relation to the fact that we can perceive it right now and it's there, we say it's abiding. Does that make sense? It's a bit like long and short. Long and short. If I were to show you a pencil now, and I say this is short in relation to what? A broomstick. Yeah. So in relation to a broomstick is short. In relation to a matchstick, it's long. You can't say it's long and short, both in relation to the same thing. You can't say it's short in relation to the matchstick and it's long in relation to the matchstick. That's impossible. Does that make sense? So long and short are contradictory? Well, actually they're not. In general, they're not, because this pencil is both long and short. But what's contradictory is in relation to what? Right? In relation to something shorter, it's long. In relation to something longer, it's short. So in relation to that, based on that, we can say those two are contradictory. Being shorter than X and being longer than X, that's contradictory. Does that make sense? Being longer, so if I say being longer than a matchstick and being shorter than a matchstick, is that possible? Contradictory, it's impossible. There's nothing that can be both shorter than a matchstick and longer than a matchstick. Okay, all right. So therefore, in relation to one thing, the flower is abiding. In relation to something else, it's disintegrating. There's no problem. Right?
I'm struggling with that.
You're struggling with that. Okay.
Because you're talking about the same item
Yes.
at the same time, and you're saying that it abides and disintegrates. I can follow that part. But then when you say you've got to compare it to different things,
Okay. All right. You have so do you have to compare it to different things? Do you want to sit there? Okay. Okay. All right. So actually, it's compared to different things is the same as saying in relation to different things. You don't struggle with the fact that a pencil is short in relation to one thing and long in relation to something else. That you're a cousin to a particular person, but a brother or sister, I was going to say, or brother to someone else. Have to be different people. Like think of your sense of identity. We can apply this to everything. Who am I? I'm a nun. I'm a woman. I'm German. I'm a sister. I'm a cousin. I'm a daughter. Okay, it's always in relation to someone else that I label. In relation to my vows, I label nun. In relation to certain body parts, as well as my attitude, I'm labeling woman. Probably mainly my attitude, I guess we could say nowadays. In relation to one person, I'm a cousin. In relation to a different person, I'm a sister. In relation to my parents, so it's different phenomena. Here, when we say the plant or the flower is there, it's in relation to the fact that we can perceive it, right? For instance. But in relation to the fact that I can see it, it's disintegrating, that doesn't explain why it's disintegrating, right? It wouldn't be wrong, in this case, it wouldn't even be wrong to say that, but that doesn't explain why I label it that way. Why do I call it disintegrating? In relation to the fact that it's changing moment by moment. You could say that each moment is different and it's moving closer to its own destruction. So in relation to that, I would use the verb, it's a verb. In this case, first it's a noun, the cousin, sister, and so forth. Here I'm using a noun, disintegrating. In relation to that, it's correct to label it disintegrating, right? I mean, that's the Prasangika school, and they say everything is just labeled. So why do we apply a label? I'm not saying it is not changing. It is unchanging. That would be wrong. I cannot label. I can apply the label to this flower, it's unchanging, but that would simply be wrong because it's not that's not what conventionally the word unchanging, it doesn't refer to something, or the word unchanging, the convention of being unchanging cannot be applied to a flower. But the convention disintegrating, changing, disintegrating can be applied to a flower, but only in relation to something other than itself, because it's always a dependence on something that I can apply a term. If it existed inherently, then of course I could do anything. Then it wouldn't depend on anything, and I could just, it would be absurd in the first place. But anyway, so it doesn't exist independently. It exists independent. So even applying a term is always in relation to something other than itself. Right? So I don't say I apply the term in relation to the flower. I say I apply the term, I don't apply the term disintegrating in relation to itself. That doesn't make sense. I apply, doesn't explain anything. I apply the term disintegrating in relation to the fact that this flower is changing and slowly moving towards its own destruction or disintegration or state of having disintegrated. I'm saying it exists or it's abiding based on the fact that I can see it.
It's the same thing, though.
But what you label it on is the same, but in relation to what you label it is not the same.
When you describe the abiding, I understood what you're saying, because it's a movement, and you know that the movement is eventually going to disintegrate. So every moment it is disintegrating. But when you call it abiding, you are looking at, you're comparing it to itself, right? The flower itself, and you say you can't compare it to itself.
You're saying the flower. Okay, so you're saying that in the case of disintegrating, yes, we're labeling it disintegrating, we're using the term disintegrating in relation to something other than itself.
Right.
Okay, but the term it is abiding, we don't need to apply this in relation to something other than itself, because we could just say in relation to the flower, it's existing.
Okay, well, that's fine. Because what I heard you say is that you always had to label it against something other than itself. And you just said,
Yes.
when I say it's abiding, I can say,
No, I just repeated your statement. I don't agree.
okay,
So-
I agree.
Okay, so the flower is abiding because it is a flower, because it is a flower. But the problem with that is a flower can also be arising, and when it's arising, it's not a flower. A flower can have you can talk about a disintegrated flower, but that's not a flower, right? Okay, so then in that case, the fact, because it is a flower right now, therefore I can say it is okay. But that's not the same as saying, it's not saying because flower, it exists, right? The flower exists because of flower, because it is a flower. Well, that would work. The flower exists because it's a flower. But you see, it's a little difficult. I'm going too much here into the philosophy. The flower is arising. We talk about a flower arising. This is a debate by Nagarjuna in the beginning of the Mula Madhyamika Karika. When he argues, at the time of the cause of the flower, there is no flower. Right? At the time of the cause of the flower, there is no flower. But the flower is arising. The flower is being generated. If the flower existed inherently, you would have to say the flower exists at the time of its cause, because it is arising. Right? That's Nagarjuna's argument. If it existed inherently and it were arising, then it would have to be there. You couldn't just label flower as arising without there being an actual flower. Or at the time when the flower has disintegrated, you couldn't be talking about the flower has disintegrated, because if it exists inherently at the moment when it has disintegrated, you have to have a flower. Because you can't just label flower as disintegrated without having a flower, because things are not merely labeled, they exist truly. Am I making sense? Right? So you can use the word flower even before it's there, or after it's gone. Yeah? So just because you use, but okay, at those times flower is not there, so I guess I agree with you. You could say in that moment, because it is a flower. Yeah. Oh, so the flower exists because it is a flower in that moment. It exists, flower exists because the flower is arising because, but you could also say the flower is arising because it is a flower. Because that which is arising is a flower, just not in that moment. It doesn't work. You see?
Right.
Doesn't work. So just because it is a flower doesn't mean it exists right now.
Right.
Yeah? I'm getting confused.
Well, that's clear in your diagram, that arising happens first, and it's all arising.
Mm-hmm.
And then you don't have abiding until it is already arisen.
Pardon?
It doesn't abide until it is fully a flower.
Yeah, until it's a flower, unless it's a flower. But we have to also apply in that moment.
Yes.
Because even Mao Zedong is still Mao Zedong and he's no longer with us.
Right.
That's an example we use all the time. Mao Zedong for some reason. Because everyone knows Mao Zedong is dead. It comes up a lot in the debate. So like Mao Zedong never exists. Right? First Dalai Lama exists, the second Dalai Lama exists. Just not now. That's a little weird. I can see from your faces like, ugh. Because we say everything exists and has to exist now. But honestly, if it existed in the past, okay, it existed. But still, in general, we can say exists without having to specify. In English, it's a little harder because we do use the 3 times.
You can say abiding.
Pardon?
You can say abiding. Mao Zedong is abiding right now. You can say that.
No, right now he's not abiding.
Not abiding, but existing.
In general, Mao Zedong exists,
Oh.
but not now. Yeah, not now. Anyway, this is a little complicated. The 3 times, the moment it goes into the 3 times, it gets a little difficult. But okay, as long as we understand the pen is big and small in relation to different things, and that we can say it is there, it is disintegrating, and it has arisen. Okay, all right. So I guess that's it.
In Tibetan and Sanskrit, there's no past, present, and future tenses?
There is, but not for the word exist.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, right? It exists. Whereas like having arisen, yes, there's 3 times, present, past, and future, at least in Tibetan. I'm pretty sure in Sanskrit as well. Yeah.
I
Yes.
have a question. So, according to the Madhyamika Prasangika,
Yes.
does how do you call it, Mitapa,
Impermanent.
impermanent phenomena, does abide at some point?
According to the Prasangika school, does an impermanent phenomenon abide?
Because for me it doesn't.
It doesn't?
It doesn't make sense that something abide.
You don't think anything abides? Anything remains?
According
Do you
to-
abide? Are you there?
Because for example, the example of the plant, right?
Okay.
For example, if you have like a sprout, what do you say?
Sprout, yes.
Sprout, right?
Yeah.
And after that,
Yeah.
let's say 3 moments, right? A
Yes.
sprout,
Yes.
a plant,
Yes.
and the second moment of the plant, right?
Okay, yes.
Which we would not be the same plant, right?
No.
So in the moment the sprout
I
is
understand.
ceasing,
Mm-hmm.
the plant is arising,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the moment which the plant arises,
Mm-hmm.
the seed, the sprout already ceased,
Mm-hmm.
but is arising the second moment of the plant,
Mm-hmm.
right? And in the moment, in the third moment, the plant, the first plant,
Yes,
will
yes, yes.
be deceased.
Okay, okay.
So how is
Alright.
it?
Okay,
so
Lobsang's question. Let me reformulate your question. Make sure I understand it correctly. When you're talking about a plant, like a flower existing, I think what he's saying is basically even if you take 1 second of plant, 1 second of flower, it can be subdivided into further moments, and each moment is different from the next. And then every moment can be again further divided, endlessly divided. So it seems like what is there if everything is constantly changing? Is that your question? Geshe Thupten Pasang, he once answered this. Remember? In a slightly different way. He used a particular, I'll give you a hint. You jump out of a plane. Remember the jumping out of a plane? You jump out of a plane without a parachute. It works better that way. You'll hear why. So you jump out of this plane, it's like 3,000 meters up in the air. So it takes a few moments until you crash. Yeah. So in each moment, you're in a different place. You're rapidly racing towards the earth, right? Yeah, you agree? You all agree. You're never in the same spot. But how long does it take you to, a minute to touch? Let's say a minute, whatever. So during that minute, each second of that minute, I can label falling. I'm dropping. Person is dropping. But the person is never in the same spot. So your argument, Venerable Lobsang's argument would be, well, that means the person is not dropping, Because they're always in a different spot. So how can you apply the word dropping to that person? We're not saying there are all these different people falling off the plane. I mean, there's just one person who forgot their parachute, right? So there's just one person dropping, no one else. Let's call this person Peter. Okay, so Peter is dropping down, right? But Peter's always in a different space. He's never in the same spot. And still we say Peter is dropping. In fact, it's not the same Peter. I mean, Peter, let's not forget, not only is he always in the same place, he's not even the same person. So how can I even call him Peter? I should call him Peter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, even faster than that. I'm not counting fast enough. How can I do that? If in the end that's basically his question. How can I say Peter is falling if he's always in a different spot? He's dropping, he's always in a different spot. How can I call him Peter? How can I say he's still alive if it's a different Peter every moment, right? Well, because conventionally we have agreed, even when we're changing, you're still Venerable Lobsang. I don't have to rename you in every second, give you a different name, because it's as per.
So it's a wrong view. Like he's falling, like if the same person is falling.
It's not a wrong view, because we all agree it's the same continuum. We're not saying that this person, we call them Peter and they're always the same. Rationally, we don't say that. We think so. Our holding on to permanence suggests that they're unchanging. But if we think about it rationally, yeah, their mind is changing, their brain is changing, their body is changing, so therefore they are changing. We all agree. It feels different because of our misconceptions, basically because our root misconception of inherent existence suggests that things exist so concretely and so substantially that they're unchanging. They must be unchanging. In fact, if they hypothetically were to exist inherently, they would be permanent, right? Because they would exist independently, and something that exists independently certainly doesn't depend on causes and conditions that make it change, cause it to change. Do you agree? Right? So if something existed inherently, it would have to be permanent. It wouldn't depend on causes and conditions that cause it to change. However, it doesn't exist in that way, but that doesn't mean we don't perceive it to exist permanently. It's on a level we're not even aware of. That's what's so fascinating. We can have different minds operate at different times, not at the same time, but still operate at different times that have totally contradictory views. And we're not even aware of the contradictions. Right? I know intellectually that Venerable Lobsang or Peter is changing moment by moment. And I know that I'm calling Peter, I still call him Peter. Why make it more difficult? That would be ridiculous. How can we talk to each other if you have to apply different names? You don't even know which number you're at right now. Like the first moment after birth is Peter number 1, and then you keep counting. What is the speed of counting and what second? It's so absurd. Language is supposed to make things easier and not make it more complicated. Therefore, we can use language, we can use the word Peter, we can say Peter abides, we can say Peter's dropping to the earth. Won't abide that long, and he won't be among us much longer, but for a few seconds still with us. Sorry, sounds terrible. Yes, but, so this is how we look at things rationally, but of course on an emotional level, I can still hold a grudge when it comes to Peter, because he did something last year, and there's a sense that's still the same guy. Or it can be very attached to Peter, because I'm thinking this great thing he did for me last year, that's still the same person, and I'm still holding on to this person. So we have these contradictory perceptions of things, but one, of course, is because of our afflictions. All right. But to return, of course, to the question, there is abiding, there is disintegrating, and so forth. And they actually, as I've just said, happen at the same time, right? So things are disintegrating. But of course, impermanence, what's so fascinating about it, the better we understand it, the easier it is to understand emptiness. If you think about it, right? So we're talking about all this with the abiding and all that stuff to understand impermanence. That is very much part of understanding impermanence. And what kind of compassion are we discussing right now? Not just compassion that focuses on sentient beings and nothing else, but we're discussing a type of compassion that is conjoined with wisdom. Wisdom, understanding, realizing impermanence. Subtle impermanence, not coarse impermanence, subtle impermanence. And that understanding takes us closer to understanding emptiness, being subtle impermanence of something, but it also helps to improve our compassion. Okay, I said two things. It helps us to understand impermanence better. It takes us closer to understanding emptiness, to understand lack of inherent existence, and it helps us to deepen our compassion. How does it help us to understand emptiness better? Any idea? How does an understanding of the subtle impermanence of myself and other phenomena, other people, for instance, help us to understand the selflessness of these people, of myself and of these people? What do you think? Go ahead.
If we see that our body is changing moment by moment all the time, our minds are changing moment by moment all the time, there is no room for a inherent existing I that is sitting somewhere. Because everything is changing.
There's no room for a concrete
Yes.
and unchanging I, first of all. That's not really touching at inherent existence yet. That's a coarser version of the sense of the fact that there is no I, the way we perceive it. This is also really, really important. There are many different levels of holding on to an I that doesn't exist. Does that make sense? There are many different levels. There is a subtler level and there's a coarser level. Does that make sense? The subtlest level, that there's no self, is that there is no self that can be found apart from the merely labeled I. Right? Apart from the thought, I am writing when my hand is writing. Yeah, when my hand is writing, I label, I'm writing a letter. So if you search for that I, that besides the hand writing a letter, or let's put in the brain, whatever is active as part of, but it's certainly not an I that is also writing a letter, right? I mean, honestly, if I say I'm writing a letter, it's on the basis of what certain body parts do that I wouldn't call I. On the basis of that, I have the thought, I'm writing a letter. That I, my conceptual mind is thinking of. Where's that? Where's that I?
Nowhere.
Can't be found. It can't be found. Does it exist? Yes. Because conventionally it is okay to say, as per conventions, right? We basically agreed as society that this is one I, and then there's another I, and there's your I. Of course, from your perspective, you're only you. But from your own perspective, you're all I. We all agree. Therefore, having labeled I, all of you, on the basis of your mind and body, then when the mind and body does something, we label I. If that thought, I, were not to arise, there wouldn't be an I. Right? Without that thought, what would be the I? Right? That's a little difficult. That's like, oh, that's not enough for it to be there.
The aggregates will still be.
Yeah, but we're not, the aggregates would still be there, but we're not analyzing the aggregates. Right now, we're just analyzing the I. So, in the texts, it talks about the I exists when we're not analyzing. Without analyzing, just from the point of view of appearance, the I exists. But when we start analyzing, where exactly is it? We start analyzing something that exists beyond mind and body, beyond labeling or designation. We're basically searching for an I the way it appears to us. We're not searching for the conventional I, right? The merely labeled I. No, the way the I appears to my mind. And your personal I appears to your mind. The way it appears to your mind, which then gives way to your self-centeredness. That I we're searching for. It's not the conventional I. Our self-centeredness does not perceive the conventional I. Otherwise, it wouldn't do what it does. It wouldn't exaggerate its importance. No, we go beyond that merely labeled I, that thought I. There's something more to it. There's something more to it. Like I said so many times, there is a sense, yes, I'm labeling I. We can agree to that. We can agree to that. But only because it's already there. Because there is an inherent I label I. But in actuality, there is no inherent I. There is a conventional I because I've labeled it. That's it. But what is also important is when we say I'm simplifying it. Because when I think of I, it goes along with my identity, who I am. So I keep thinking I. But not just that. As earlier on I said, I'm writing a letter, for instance. I do add there's more to the I, in other words. Think of your sense of identity. I'm German, I'm a nun, I'm a woman, I'm living in Asia, there's a whole list. I like chocolate. I mean, there's like a whole list. I can do, I cannot do. I'm good at this. So there are adjectives, there are verbs that I use to describe myself. And they're only labeled in relation to something other than myself. My sense of identity when it comes to relationships, friend, sibling, daughter, cousin, niece, and so forth. That's part of my identity. Always labeled in relation to other people. Right? Then what I can do based on my activities, or maybe what other people told me. And not all my labels are correct. Right? But in general, when we just focus on the correct labels I use, it's in relation to this, that, and something else. I keep saying I can do this, and that's how I form my identity. Does that make sense? But when I search for that I that can do this, that, and the other, I can't find it. It's merely labeled. In fact, even these activities are merely labeled. For instance, I'm popular, for instance. Right? Because there are a few people, of 8 billion people, there's a handful of people who like me. Or maybe some more. Or maybe I have a lot of Facebook friends or whatever. I mean, whatever makes me. So it's really ridiculous if you search for it. Because, I don't know, what even determines that? I mean, what do I know what other people think? Right? So it could be for whatever reason, but okay. Or I'm successful, or I'm not successful. If we search for that non-success, because I don't have a car or two, and I don't own a house, right? Or I don't have that much money in a bank account, or whatever. I mean, if there were inherent success, then it would be very clear in this room who's successful or not. But because there's no inherent success, as a nun, I would say I'm successful as being a nun. I mean, just the fact that I took that step. A German person somewhere in the village where I come from, they would say, she's crazy. She doesn't own 2 cars and has, I don't know, a bunch of kids and a big garden, right? So who's right and who's wrong? It just depends what I label success with. And on the basis of that, then I check, am I successful or not? Yeah, this is where it becomes a little bit more difficult when success is a little bit more relative than a table. Am I making sense? Right? A table, you know, it's not like if you have that age group, you call it a table, and if not, or if you have this religion, you call it a table. And no, there's pretty much an agreement of what a table is, at least among humans. But I'm not sure in some cultures, if they never use a table, they wouldn't call it a table. They may call it a bed, or I don't know, depending on the shape, whatever. But the point is, things such as successful or not, popular or not, those are more relative, beautiful or not. So here it becomes a lot more difficult to say this is conventionally success. No, even then we would say, oh, it just depends on like whose perception of success. Am I making sense? But the point is, when you analyze your own sense of identity, it's all just labeled. It's all just labeled, and it's in a constant flux. So we have a sense of popularity. You need to replenish that, right? It needs to be reinforced all the time. Success, yeah? I mean, then we're going into this hazy area where I'm holding on to my success, where I'm attached to it. I can't be without it. I'm holding on to that label, and I have to constantly reinforce it, because where's the success, right? It's coming and going and coming and going, and nothing is really there as solidly as it seems. Am I making sense? Still making sense? Like talking about these famous people. I mean, they constantly have to make a new movie, or they have to constantly make, I don't know, sing a successful song. Otherwise, they're just going to get forgotten. And eventually their voices will, what's the word? Degenerate to such a degree no one wants to hear them sing any longer, or there's no longer a role for them in a movie. They're no longer young and whatever. Maybe if they need a grandfather with like some kind of, what's it called, secondary role maybe, but their fame is gone. So the thing is, fame, it comes and goes. One moment, yeah, right? All over social media. Next day, forgotten. Yeah. Oops. Thank you. Oh, yeah. Oh, that was that sound. Okay. So, forgotten. A moment later, it's gone. This really helps us to show impermanence, right? That I is constantly, as Venerable Kumbin said, that the mind is changing all the time, the body's changing all the time. Where's that sense of identity really that I hold on to? And then everything else, all the adjectives I use to describe myself, all the verbs I use that are part of my sense of I, right? I have to reinforce them. Unless I reinforce them, that's no longer part of my I. But even then, even if I reinforce them, they're always different. They're always different. This already helps us to get a good sense. There's nothing concretely there, nothing inherent, nothing findable. There's just constant change, right? Atoms changing all the time. I don't even know where my body ends and where yours start, especially if you stand close to each other. Which atoms are part of your body and which are part of mine? It's too loud right now.
Where's the line? I mean, if we all had children, do we say that all our children, or does your child you look after it?
Okay, so where's the line on the conventional level? So, as I said earlier, without analyzing, and we don't need to analyze all the time. Conventions work if we don't analyze in that way that I just described. So, of course, in this lifetime, they were born from your body or you adopted them. This is your responsibility. So in that sense, yes, it's not everyone is your child on a conventional level. But the way we perceive our children, oh, this child, it's inherent in that child to be my child, right? No one else could ever be my child. This is where like, no, it's just in this lifetime. Yeah, but everyone else has been your child in many lifetimes before. So we're not negating conventional existence. This person being your child versus this person not being your child. We're not negating that. We're negating what we add to that, that extra sense. Yeah, it's just that extra, that's all. I remember being German, being raised at a certain time, it comes with guilt. You know that guilt? Right? That guilt. The younger generations are like, yeah, no, that was a long time ago. My grandfather was not even born then. You know, mine was born, so. Okay, so it comes with this guilt. So I was like, wow, inherently bad. It's really bizarre. I mean, actually, in a certain, I mean, it's good. I'm not saying it's totally bad, but it's exaggerated. Like there's an exaggeration. And I remember once talking to a good friend of mine from Israel. So we talked about this guilt and, you know, the sense of like, I was on the bad side, he's on the good side, you know, like having this conversation. And he was like, wouldn't it be funny, he said, wouldn't it be funny if I, in my last life, was a Nazi and you were a Jew? And I was like, how can you say that? Right? I'm like this inherently an always German person, and he being Jewish, he's always the one who was wronged. I mean, he wasn't alive and I wasn't alive at the time. So you see what I'm saying? It's that extra. And I was thinking, yeah, oh my God, that would be so, I mean, it wouldn't be funny, of course, I don't want to, it's not funny, but just the fact, if it was turned around, I'm identifying with something so strongly. And likewise, being a woman, right? Being female, being a woman. Like I mentioned that last time. I'm so much a woman, I'm for all women, and you know, it feels strong. There's something intrinsic in being a woman. And in my past life, for the last 10 lives, I was a man. So, oops, it's like, whoa, that's just a short moment of me thinking, having that identity. So it's pulling things apart. It's a bit like you have like a knitted shawl. That's our projections. And you realize it's all made of these threads. Just these different threads put together. It's nothing as solid. So you're pulling apart this sense of solidity. Right? That's so important. It's like the closer you look, the more things are disappearing. The closer you look. It's like pixels on a screen. Seems so solid. You look closer and closer, picture's disappearing. The single pixels, that's it. Anything we do, the moment we look closer, it's always from afar. Whether physically afar, very concrete. When we closer, the closer we get, it all disappears. But not just in that physical sense, likewise in that analytical sense. Who am I? I'm like this, I'm like that. You know, we have a very strong sense of me and we replenish that. We keep on going. But when we take it apart, they're just thoughts. They're just thoughts. And then limit ourselves. We limit ourselves. If you've always heard since you were little, you're not good at this and this. You believe it so strongly that you, what's the word? There's a word for it. The prophecy, you make self-fulfilling prophecy. That's it. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. It goes to that degree, actually. That's why Tantra works. I'm already a Buddha. Yeah. I mean, it's not like that. Pardon?
Believe it until no.
Make it until you fake it.
Oh,
Fake it
fake
until you
Make
it until you fake it.
No.
I'll make it until, fake it until you make it. Yeah, something like that. Yeah, I guess that works as well. It's just, yeah, make it until you fake it, make it until you fake it. That's That's an interesting one. Fake it until you make it, right? I mean, Tantra, of course, is not just faking it. There's more to it, not just a little. There's more to it. But in the end, it's the same psychology. If our thoughts, if there's something you can be, and this is dependent on your thoughts, then if you apply the right kind of thoughts, the right kind of causes and conditions, of which are all mental basically, you'll become that person. You'll become that. That's beautiful. The sky is the limit, literally, right? In the sense of, well, your thoughts is the limit. I mean, we're putting the limits on ourselves. It's these thoughts we have. That's why in tantric practice, it's the ordinary perception of ourselves that's such a problem. Of course, we don't want it to turn into arrogance, like non-divine arrogance, good old ordinary arrogance. That's one danger. But divine pride, right? I'm already that. And so you open the doors to all these possibilities. That's how it works. It's beautiful. But first we need to understand there wasn't anything in there in the first place. It doesn't exist in and of itself. Which is why before you meditate on yourself as a Buddha, it dissolves into emptiness. Because otherwise we just add to an inherent ordinary person, we add an inherent divine person. And then that really doesn't work. Right? It all makes sense, doesn't it? And impermanence is one of the first steps. Really think of yourself. Do the meditation. Think of your sense of I. Right? Think of yourself, I. Myself yesterday. Myself the day before yesterday. Especially when we choose these shorter time spans, there's a sense of permanence. Going back to my 5-year-old I, surely that's no, I don't think that's anything to do with me, who I am right now. 13-year-old, 18-year-old, no, nothing to do, or some similarity, but I don't identify with that person. But I identify with the self of me yesterday and the day before yesterday. Where's that I? Mind and body totally changed. You have to do the meditation. Talking about it right now, it doesn't hit you. You have to go step by step. Next homework. Next homework. Your homework for next time, you sit down with your personal sense of I, your personal sense of who I am yesterday and the day before yesterday. What is the difference between yesterday's I, and today's I? Just allow it to appear in your mind. Don't think like a Buddhist. In that moment, don't think what I should think, but what the Buddha tells us to think. No, how it feels. How does it really feel? The I that is meditating, is that the same that got up this morning and brushed its teeth? Yeah, and really get in touch with that sense. That's exactly the same. And then meditate on the fact your body is made of atoms, constantly changing. None of your cells looks the same as the cells that were part of your body this morning. None of your thoughts are the same. They're similar. There's certain behavioral patterns, but they're never exactly the same. Never exactly the same. So, not being exactly the same, they've changed, obviously. All right? And you go back, it's just changing. And go do it. Do nothing else. Don't go anywhere else. Just stay with that changing. Remain with that for some time until you get a sense, everything is just changing. And then return to your sense of I. Does it clash? The original sense of I, does this hold up too? Does this still hold? In the face of the fact that you've totally changed from this morning until now, where is there a possibility of a permanent I? Of a concrete I? It can really help to dissolve it, as they say. Not that I know. But, right? It can dissolve that sense of an I. Does that make sense? So please try. We all do it. That meditation on impermanence. Okay, very important. But not just that. There's also a few things I thought to note down in terms of how the understanding of subtle impermanence fosters our compassion. how it helps us to develop compassion, subtle impermanence. It seems like there's impermanence there and there's compassion over here. Impermanence is rational, compassionate is emotional. Compassion is emotional, right? So what's the relationship? But let's see. So I jotted down a few things. So I'm not just reading them, but so subtle impermanence. Here we're not talking about coarse impermanence. We're talking about subtle impermanence, changing moment by moment. It profoundly basically benefits. It profoundly benefits our development of compassion in several ways. First of all, attachment. Attachment and aversion are our problems when it comes to compassion. Okay? Aversion in particular. I don't have compassion for someone I don't like. Right? It's as simple as that. It's very difficult to like someone. Before we have compassion, we need to like them. We need to have a feeling of closeness and endearment, as Lama Tsongkhapa says. So how do we get there if I don't like that person? Well, first of all, there's attachment to myself. We grasp at things, myself, people, possessions, experiences, yeah? As if they were solid, unchanging, and inherently satisfying. That's also when we feel attached to something. And when we perceive sentient beings as these fixed entities, then of course our attachment can lead to disappointment, to anxiety, and even resentment when the person no longer lives up to the promise. I remember something Jitsuma Denzapama once said. I read it somewhere. I don't remember in what context she said it, and I thought it was so true. The people we are most attached to, we can sometimes treat the worst, right? We would never treat the bus driver who we don't know, or the shopkeeper. There's always a sense of respect, isn't there? But the people we're really close to, when we get into a fight, wow, it can get really hurtful. Yeah? So that shows how close those two are connected. Attachment, expectations. I want them to do something. I'm much more annoyed when they do something I don't want them to do. I'm much faster getting annoyed. The sense of respect I may have for another person, it's not there in that moment. The bus driver may drive too fast, and I don't know, maybe he smells of I don't know, having smoked or something. That really, I find that. But I will not say anything to them. I'm not going to tell them next time don't smoke before you get on the bus or something. I'm not going to do that because there's a sense of respect. But the person I'm attached to, there's not that respect. I'm right away. It's so funny sometimes when like couples, you know, like you're like a witness to their kind of like, I think like it's really subtle, but it's not. Right? I mean, and I know, there was a time when I was not a nun, and, I was like, how annoyed I got with my boyfriend or so, it's like, or my parents for that matter, or my sibling, even my best friend sometimes, it's like, ugh. So it's that closeness, which the closeness is not the problem, the attachment is the problem, which leads to that kind of resentment. Also aversion, our aversion towards certain beings or situation arises from seeing them as fixed, inherently bad, or permanently threatening. So if someone behaves in a way we dislike, we see them as this unchangeable person, which fuels anger and resentment. If we recognize their moment by moment change, that allows for the possibility of transformation, right? At least it allows, of course they repeat the same behavior, yes, but to see it, this is like, we exaggerate nonetheless that they're exactly the same. That's not true. Also, of course, the problem is with aversion and attachment, we waste a lot of valuable energy, right? Our mind is so preoccupied with our attachment, with our aversion. And if we understand subtle impermanence, that may reveal how much mental energy we waste in these reactive patterns based on outdated information, right? We may still be upset with what our parents did in the past, or what our siblings did, or, like we go back in time. I keep saying that we've taken Sigmund Freud to an extreme. The good old man can't be blamed, you know, like he really tried to find a cause for our problems. So it's not blaming him, but we just focus on the negative. We never take the time to focus on the positive, right? I mean, I'm thinking of my own sister. Ooh, she can go on for a long time how my parents made all these mistakes. But then she's actually really successful at her job, and I don't dare. In moments she's really happy, I would say, but didn't you learn everything? Now you're so successful. And sometimes she's like, yeah, but that was me. And I'm like, what? It's like, you know, everything that was bad in her life were our parents, and everything that's good in life was her hard work. And I'm like, it's not exactly like that, you know. I mean, you learned how to speak. They taught, you know, our parents taught you how to walk, and you know, certain things they did. We never spend time. We go over and over and over about the mistakes, and I'm including myself. I mean, I was once an 18-year-old, like upset with what my parents had done wrong, etc. So I obsessed over the negative. That became bigger and bigger, and I didn't see the positive. And the funny thing is, on top of that, I am a victim of my parents. But my parents are a victim of their my grandparents. So I should not blame my parents. I should actually blame my grandmother. It's her fault. But wait a moment. She is the victim of my great-grandmother. So how far am I going to go back? Because, you know, like, yeah, my mom did things, but my grandmother did other things, and you can go back endlessly. So to focus on like what's gone wrong, and it's past. It's gone. This person who was your mom is no longer, if she's still alive, she's no longer is like that. My mom now is not like the way she was when I was a kid. Very different. Once we were teenagers, we made sure she changed. My sister and I were very willful. My parents were extremely strict. But we were so terrible, I guess. At some point they were like, okay, now you can do whatever you want. Literally. But the fun was gone with that. That's what I never wanted to. Then I didn't want to. I could go. My mom at some point did these crazy things because we were so willful, especially I was the older. And at some point she said, now you can do whatever you want. That's really not a pedagogically skilled thing. I was only 16. But the good thing was then, I don't want to party all night if I'm allowed to. I didn't. I stopped doing it. It lost its, you know. Anyway, that's a whole different story. It's not important to this. But so the thing is, everything changes. So wasting so much time and directing our energy towards things that have already changed, they're not the same. Going back in time, obsessing about the past, well, it doesn't benefit us. Yeah, there's not much time. So if you loosen that grip of attachment and aversion, we create mental space. And that helps us, of course, to generate more compassion. And if we're not constantly trying to hold on to or push away, our minds become more open and flexible. It's not like object of attachment, object of aversion, object of indifference. No, we let go of that, and it's just people deserving of our care. All right. Also, when we reflect on impermanence, it prevents the overwhelm and depression from other suffering. Because when we witness immense suffering in this world, right, a common reaction is that we feel overwhelmed, helpless, or even depressed, believing the suffering to be fixed and insurmountable. Does that make sense? Fixed, like insurmountable, not being able to overcome the suffering. It's nothing you can do about it. Insurmountable, am I saying it? Is that a correct definition? Yeah. Insurmountable in the sense, yeah, there's nothing I can do about it. And that's not true. So how does it benefit compassion? Well, if you understand subtle impermanence, then we understand that suffering is also constantly changing. There are coming and going. Problems are coming and going. While suffering exists, it's not a permanent, unchangeable state. Because what we call the suffering is always different. Even the body, we call it pervasive condition suffering. Yeah, but it's constantly changing, right? So it's not like things always remain the same. So it prevents us to become paralyzed by despair. And instead of seeing an endless, static suffering, we see a dynamic process where moments of suffering arise and cease. Okay? So this kind of fosters a sense of hope, determination, and it empowers us to engage without being crushed by the weight of seemingly intractable, insurmountable problems that cannot be solved. It's not like that, because causes and conditions. So if the right kind of causes and conditions are applied, the result will be a different one, right? Okay. Then, of course, it also reveals the natural vulnerability and suffering of sentient beings, right? At the same time. Well, because in every moment, beings are undergoing disintegration and re-arising. Coming, going, right? Like, there's no certainty. Like, the things you hold on to 1 second, it's like trying to hold on to quicksand. There's nothing to hold on to. Yeah, we're trying constantly to stop time. It, like a routine. It makes us feel secure. But that's a fake security. It seems like it's all the same, but it's not all the same. And because it's changing, one day may be rapidly different. And that's it, our security is gone. Yeah, that feeling of safety. So if from the beginning we just let go of that holding on to things, right, then we suffer less. But the fact sentient beings don't know that, they suffer because of all that change, because of that uncertainty. There's never any stability, really. There's no true stability. And this natural instability is a form of suffering, basically, right, for sentient beings. There is no stability. Let it go. Your need for stability. Letting go is the only way to deal with it. But sentient beings don't know to do that. So when we perceive beings as constantly flowing, then we understand that there's no truly solid independent sense, and we can see their fundamental vulnerability. Right? We can come to see that independent solid sense is not there, and that vulnerability, that they're basically swept along by causes and conditions all the time, especially with the mental afflictions, right? Those are negative causes and conditions that's the reason they suffer all the time. If they were gone, no problem. But it's the mental afflictions that basically create all these negative causes and conditions. So, yeah. But of course, it also highlights the possibility of eliminating suffering through causes and conditions. So the understanding of impermanence is, of course, intertwined with the principle of dependent arising. And if everything is constantly changing, it is because things arise and cease in dependence on their causes and conditions. Which means, very crucial for our compassion, it shows that since things are changing due to their causes and conditions, suffering can be removed, as I said before, by applying the right kind of causes and conditions. In our own case, let's check the causes and conditions and make a change. So if you're fixated on our parents, that's something we can't change. That's not a cause and condition in the sense that I can do something about that, but I can change who I am right now, right? And not believe I'm like that because I was messed up or whatever. We can all change. So if suffering were inherent and unchanging, there would be no hope for its cessation, of course. But because it arises from causes, those causes can be reduced, purified, or eliminated. And new positive causes for happiness can be cultivated. It's that opens up so many possibilities. So this empowers compassion to be active, purposeful, and optimistic about the potential for liberation from suffering. Right? And of course, it fosters interconnectedness, a sense of interconnectedness. Because if all phenomena, including sentient beings, are constantly changing, then they change in dependence on other things. Right? So we become the cause of someone else's changes. They become the cause for our change. It's different causes and conditions that enable that change. So basically, it's an interconnectedness on the basis of causes and conditions. What did I get to? Yes. So constantly changing. So there cannot be a truly separate, independent self or other, but rather than this interconnection, this understanding of interconnection and understanding that we depend on others and they depend on us. Yeah. It also helps the dissolution of blame and credit. Right? When we truly see that beings are constantly changing moment by moment. So traditional notions of blame or even credit, like this inherent, they're good and they're bad. These I blame for my problems, and these are all. This is such a weird tendency we have, this kind of black and white thinking. It's ridiculous. I mean, right after COVID, what was the first thing? Who's to blame? Right? Who made the wrong decisions about lockdowns and about whatever? I mean, all that time and energy was wasted on finding someone to blame. And who did it all right and who did it all wrong? It's never like that. Or these stupid news, honestly. I mean, it's like there's always the good guy and the bad guy. And that keeps changing. You know, there's two sides of a war, for instance. Good, bad. You can go, I mean, it's much more complicated than that. It's much more complicated, especially in festering long conflicts. I mean, it's a lot more complicated than just that. They're good, they're bad. Of course, there is more injustice one hand. Of course, it's like that. But sometimes our need is to have the good guy and the bad guy, right? They're all good and they're all bad. We don't read the news if it's like, yeah, but they make mistakes and they make mistakes. They both make mistakes. They're both driven by their hatred for each other, for instance. But then we don't want to read the news. You know? We need a good guy and a bad guy. I mean, it's really, we simplify things too much. It's much more complicated. And of course, there's still great injustices. And I'm not saying they don't exist. I'm just saying that extra we add to it. Good, bad. Simplifying things. Yeah, and so sometimes letting people get away with things because they suffered so much. That's also not okay, right? That's also not okay because they suffered. Then, therefore, that's also another problem. We need to look at the situation as it is. But this kind of sense of blame and credit, what was in the past, yeah, it's what's now, what's happening right now. So the person who performed past actions is literally not the same, of course, as the person before us now. This doesn't negate responsibility, very important, but it opens space for seeing beings with fresh eyes, free from the burden of their history. Right? The sentient beings like us. If they've done terrible things, we shouldn't see them as that right now, like they're still carrying that burden of their history, for instance. I mean, see what we have in common rather than, yeah, we look at people and we judge them not by what we have in common, but something that is different, even if it's just the color of their skin. It's ridiculous. Little things, their religion or their beliefs or their culture, and it causes all these problems. And actually the intimacy of shared groundlessness, in the end, beyond interconnectedness, there's something very intimate about recognizing that we all share the same groundlessness. None of us have a solid ground to stand on. Nothing. Right? Constantly changing. We label, yes, that seems to be some continuity, but as we said before, we label dropping, and in each moment it's different. So we believe because we use the same word, then there's something to be found. This is also how prejudices rise, right? There's a certain group of people. In that group, one person does something. I label, I don't know, rude. And from then on, when I see people with similar characteristics, I label rude. But actually, I think in that moment, the rudeness is within the object. And that's basically racism, right? Or it depends on what it is. If it's based on their ethnicity, it becomes racism. If it's based on their gender, it's misogynism. Can you say that for men as well? Not really, right? But yeah, anyway. So the point is, therefore, what we all share is that constant change. That we're all changing. There's nothing solid. There's no solid I. There's no solid mind or solid body. And so this shared predicament of constantly having to recreate ourselves moment by moment can actually evoke a kind of tender, kind of protective compassion. Right? That's our predicament. We're all in the same boat. And of course it helps the development of compassion, because it dissolves these rigid boundaries that we erect between ourselves and others. Right? All these ideas we have about people, dividing them into these and those and so forth. So when we see that I'm also constantly changing, and that my experiences are interconnected with the changing experiences of others, it becomes much easier to have compassion. The suffering of others is not something entirely separate from my experience. Right? It's part of the larger impermanent web of existence that we all share. All right. And of course, it emphasizes a sense of urgency. We need to do something now. We have the opportunity now. Opportunities change. We have a precious human rebirth right now. Let's not waste it. And again, that helps us. If I don't do it now, when am I going to do it? I keep procrastinating. Oh yeah, one day I'll go into retreat, or one day I'm going to practice this. Right now I'm busy. Procrastination is our worst enemy. It's actually part of laziness, right? It's a kind of laziness. Yeah, today I've got something nicer to do, something more important. Okay, so in that way, once we understand that, understand subtle impermanence, well, it strips away, in conclusion, the illusions of permanence, and it helps us to better understand, of course, the lack of inherent existence, the way I talked about it before. Yeah. Anyway, no need to say too much about it. So now, if we understand that, then it makes sense why Lama Tsongkhapa emphasizes here the meditation on impermanence. But of course also the meditation on lack of inherent existence, and the reasoning that just applied is the same. Actually works in the same way. Whatever positive aspects I mentioned in terms of meditating on subtle impermanence can also be used for meditating on the lack of inherent existence, right? Okay, so now I'll continue reading what we went through yesterday or last time on Saturday. So basically, after Chandrakirti explained these two types of compassion. One type of compassion is, of course, just focusing on, the three types of compassion. The previous we've covered. So there's compassion focusing merely on sentient beings. Then there is compassion that focuses on sentient beings, but it's conjoined with the understanding of the impermanence of sentient beings. Okay? Meditating on the impermanence of sentient beings in particular, and then generating compassion is beneficial, of course, for the reasons I gave earlier. Here it's important that we say conjoin. That doesn't mean these two minds exist together. It doesn't mean that they don't exist, that they can't be both active at the same time. Does that make sense? So when you have compassion for sentient beings, you can't focus on their impermanence. When you focus on their impermanence, you can't have compassion for them. Method and wisdom, in that way, don't work together. And this is not just true for method and wisdom. As we all know, we can have a thought at a time, and if we want to think of something else, we drop that thought and take something else to mind. We can alternate very quickly, which may appear as if it happens simultaneously, but it doesn't, right? So we focus on the suffering of sentient beings, we focus on the impermanence of sentient beings, and then focus on sentient beings, wishing them to be free from suffering. But once we do once we go through the earlier part, focusing on their impermanence, that now influences our compassion. It influences our compassion. That's a fascinating thing about minds, that even if a mind is not actively there, it lies dormant, it can still influence our perception of things. The example I gave many, many times is the example when you fall in love with someone, right? You're totally in love. That's a very positive emotion. Even when that thought of being in love with that person lies dormant because you're busy doing something else, you're not thinking of them, it influences your perception. everything looks brighter, everything looks, food tastes better, even the rain, pink clouds, that's where it comes from. Pink clouds, everything is beautiful because of that emotion. So it affects all your other perceptions. Or when you're grieving, when you're deeply sad, upset about something, everything loses its meaning. Everything turns gray. So even when your grief is not active, it lies dormant for a while, you forgot about it, you're busy with something else, your mind can only do one thing at a time, especially the mental consciousness. I'm not talking about the sense consciousnesses, they can still, of course, perceive things, even though there's, the sense, like when you eye consciousness perceives something, in that moment your ear consciousness doesn't perceive anything. It switches very quickly back and forth. But especially on a mental level, on the level of the mental consciousness, it can only do one thing at a time. But other minds, when they lay dormant, they can affect our actions, or they can affect other thoughts. So similarly here, when you talk about great compassion, it's a very strong emotion, very strong. This love, it's not just love for one sentient being, it's for all sentient beings. And I remember when I had a crush on someone when I was 13 for the first time. That was the first time I ever had a crush. But I remember I was so happy. I mean, this person didn't know about me, as it happened many times. So I had these crushes on guys that never even knew who I was. But I felt so happy. I was so in love with this person. There's no attachment. They didn't even talk to me. Didn't even look at me. But I remember that feeling of just loving, just this closeness to this person without them even knowing I existed. And that was such a happy feeling. Of course, later on, attachment and stuff, and all the mess started. But that was a really pure feeling of just, I want them the very best. And I'm always reminded of this book, the title of this book, I mentioned it before, Mingyur Rinpoche's book, In Love with the World. I thought, so that feeling, and probably much greater than the feeling I had when I was 13, then multiplied by all sentient beings. Wow. That's beautiful. There's no longer any fear. Why do we have fear of other sentient beings? Only if there's resentment. Only if we don't like them. If we totally love them and we want them to be happy, their happiness is all I want. So why would I have fear of any sentient beings? I just love them. I just want them to be happy. I'm so much happier because I rejoice in all their success, of course. Right now, I can only rejoice in my own success. And that's just one person's success. That is so minor. But first of all, you're happy for the success of everyone, and there's no fear. There's an endless source of joy. Which is why when you look at His Holiness, there's joy just coming forth. It's just this person totally joyful, right? Pure joy. In love with the world, in love with everyone. Just, isn't that beautiful? That is worth it to work towards it. Just from a selfish point of view, it makes total sense to generate that kind of love for sentient beings. Okay, so that is the kind of mind we're talking about. Now that influences your wisdom. It's conjoined with your understanding. Your understanding enhances. Then there's your understanding. That in turn enhances. Your understanding of things gets better. You have the space in your mind, impermanence, right? Things don't change all the time. You take the time. You're not preoccupied with this attachment and that aversion. That's why we're so distracted, because there's a lot of attachment. So many attachments. We can't keep the mind still. Now, if we generate more love and compassion for other sentient beings, our mind grows calmer, more focused, and now you focus on sentient beings' impermanence, for instance. You can focus on it. It's joyful. It's not like, when is that session over? I hope it can continue a little longer. Yeah. And then your understanding of subtle impermanence influences your compassion. So they're conjoined now. Although none of them are active at the same time, even while lying dormant, The one that lies dormant enhances the one active, and vice versa, actually, vice versa. Yeah, so that's what it's saying here, basically. And the rest, I think, is pretty easy. He uses the analogy of the water, understanding sentient beings are like the water, if you like. So the rippling, they're always changing, the rippling, the waves, the reflection of the moon, they appear to exist inherently, they appear to be, just as a reflection appears to be the actual moon, but it's not. Okay, so from that perspective, it's just the analogy is beautiful. You may use that as part of your meditation first. But in the end, just like this example, bodhisattvas are under the power of compassion. Totally under the power of compassion. You know, like a person who's newly in love, totally under the control of their feeling in love. A person grieving, totally under the control. Likewise, a bodhisattva, totally under the control of their compassion. That's their whole life. That's all. Yeah? When you think of these lamas, some of the lamas, I'm not saying all the lamas, but with many lamas it becomes pretty obvious. It's just, it's effortless. Right? I mean, their schedule is like, they never get a break. They never go to the beach. They, right? Only for the benefit of others. Right? Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche, they did go to the beaches with all their disciples and basically taught. So it was like, that's not a vacation, going to the beach and not thinking of compassion. Going to the beach and focusing on compassion, great. But then whether you go to the beach or you're on the garbage dump, it doesn't make a difference. As long as there's compassion, the place doesn't matter. Right? We need to really understand that this is what these bodhisattvas are all about. That's why they're called bodhisattvas. They're not just called compassionate beings, but they're called those whose essence, whose entire life revolves only around that. Nothing else. Everything else only assists their compassion. It's a little frustrating because it shows us how far we still have to go, but yeah, it's better to be realistic. Yeah, but we can all get there. So just like this example, bodhisattvas are under the power of compassion when they see other sentient beings, beings who reside in the ocean of identity view. Okay, so beings under the control, being under the control, okay, there are questions. Being under the control of their identity view, yes, holding on to an inherently existent I, me, and mine. I and mine, yes. An ocean into which flow the vast blue lakes of ignorance, replenishing it. Yeah, we continue with our ignorance. It keeps replenishing it, reinforcing it. An ocean that's being beaten up by the storms of, that's the word, false mental projections, the exaggerating attitude. That's the word I was looking for last time. So false mental projection. We always exaggerate the positive aspects of something we're attached to. We exaggerate the negative aspects of something we don't like. So these emotions are always exaggerations. None of our afflictive emotions negates anything. Usually they don't negate anything. Most mental afflictions, unless they negate the existence of emptiness or past and future lives. But usually, especially the emotions, they're always add more to what's there. Always exaggerate. When they see such beings before them, beings who appear like reflections of their own positive and negative karma. Right? We're all reflections of our own positive and negative karma. And we keep reinforcing it. And of whom befalls the suffering of conditioned existence, of moment by moment disintegration, and see these beings as devoid of intrinsic existence, great compassion for them arises in the bodhisattvas, so for other sentient beings. As explained above, this also arises on the basis of a sense of endearment towards other sentient beings and from contemplating their plight and wandering in the cycle of existence. So that makes it even more complete. Number one, we have to generate that sense of closeness, endearment, and understand how they suffer. And number two, or how they wander in the cycle of existence, sorry. And number two is, even right now, their wrong views, their mental afflictions, how they're drowning in their afflictions, how their karmic seeds ripen, have this experience and that experience. So looking at sentient beings in that way and contemplating the fact they go up and down, are reborn in different states, really enables us to generate that sense of compassion. Although the identity view is a form of ignorance, this grasping at the inherent existence of I and mine is a form of ignorance. Ignorance is mentioned here separately in Chandrakirti's auto-commentary. He uses the word identity view versus ignorance, although the identity view is a type of ignorance. But sometimes it's just easier when terminology is used differently, so not to get confused. So here he talks about ignorance of grasping at the self-existence of phenomena. He talks about ignorance as the mind that grasps at the inherent existence of phenomena, which not the inherent existence of persons, but the inherent existence of phenomena, which induces the identity view. So here we distinguish between phenomena and person. Seems pretty random, like what? Everything that exists on one hand called phenomena, but not including person, and then person. Right? Like if I were to divide the whole world into two categories, that seems really weird. Everything that exists except person and person. Like everything that exists minus dogs and dogs. Or everything that exists minus buttercup flowers, right? Or minus roses and then roses. That's like one tiny category, right? Sentient beings. But then again, it's not that tiny. Especially since the self plays such a huge part. I mean, in holding on to the inherent existence of the self is such a huge problem. It's much more of a problem than holding on to the inherent existence of a book. It leads to the most powerful form of attachment. Holding on to the inherent existence of sentient beings, or a particular sentient beings, gives rise to a much stronger version of attachment, as opposed to holding on to the inherent existence of a phenomenon such as a book. So in other words, we are more attached to sentient beings than to inanimate objects, right? We're more attached to our relationships, we're more attached to our family, to our friends. Inanimate objects are only secondary in most people. But of all sentient beings, there's one sentient being we're most attached to, and that's the I, right? The most powerful form. So our phenomena and sentient beings, attachment and aversion, it goes for both mental afflictions. Aversion and attachment is much more stronger when it's directed at sentient beings. But then of all the sentient beings, the attachment towards one person, the self, that's the most powerful. That is seen as the root of all our problem. That's the root cause. That's our self-centeredness, which is the most powerful attachment there is. It gives rise to all the other forms of attachment. Now, understanding that, it then makes sense to divide phenomena into sentient beings and everything else that's not a sentient being, right? That's where that category it makes sense. So here it says, grasping at the inherent existence of something other than persons, that gives rise, other than person, which means phenomena other than person, that gives rise to the identity view. What does that mean? What does that mean? What type of grasping at inherent existence? So what type of phenomenon that is perceived as inherently existent gives rise to our identity view of an inherently existent I and mine? What phenomenon could that be? It's not all phenomena. It's not all phenomena. It's not all phenomena. There are certain phenomena that are not sentient beings, based on whose inherent existence we perceive. So we hold on to their inherent existence, which then gives rise to our identity view. It's very easy. You all know that. What could that be? What could it be? Something that is not a person, it's not a sentient being, whose inherent existence we perceive, and that mind, that ignorance, gives rise to our identity view. That gives rise to our holding onto the inherent existence of I and mine.
Our possessions.
Huh?
Our possessions.
That's too vast. Possessions is too vast.
Our close possessions.
Our possessions in general is too vast. Something, possession, your most prized possession.
Body.
Body and mind. Body and mind are 5 aggregates. It's first we hold on to the inherent existence of body and mind. And then based on that we label I. And then once we label I, we hold on to the inherent existence of the I. Right? We perceive mind and body. What is the basis of imputation for the I? Mind and body. You perceive mind and body and you label I. But before you perceive mind and body, you label body, you label mind. Then you perceive that to exist inherently. Thereafter, on the basis of body and mind, you label I and mine. Perceive that to exist inherently. Which means, first, you hold on to the inherent existence of the 5 aggregates, which are phenomena, they're not person. And that then gives rise to the mind holding on to the inherent existence of myself, of the person. And we do it with other people as well. We see another person's mind and body, perceive them, at least they appear to exist inherently, but there's, in terms of the sequence, whether it's always like that is but in general, we could say, we perceive another person's body actually, so we don't really perceive their mind, but we assume there's a mind, so conceptually we consider that they have a mind, or thoughts or whatever. And then based on that, we label inherently there, and then we label the person and perceive that to exist inherently. I'm saying the sequence may not always be that way, but in general, I think we could say it starts with body and mind, and then comes the person, right? Therefore, here, the distinction is identity view is used for, especially for perceiving I and mine as inherently existent. It doesn't actually, identity view doesn't mean other sentient beings, but my own body and mind. And ignorance here refers particularly to the perception of my own body and mind as inherently existent. The other commentary, the commentary explains that the 3 types of compassion are to be distinguished not on the basis of their cognitive aspects. I don't know whether I like that translation, cognitive aspects. I would say they're not, I would not use the word cognitive, but not on the basis of what they apprehend. The aspect, what they apprehend. What do they apprehend? They apprehend freedom from suffering. So compassion focuses on all sentient beings. That is the focus, focuses on all sentient beings and wishes them to be free from suffering. That's the aspect. That's what the mind apprehends. It apprehends the freedom from suffering of all sentient beings by way of wishing for it. But it still apprehends it. It mentally conceives or mentally perceives that. Which is why here the aspect is lack of suffering of all sentient beings, but the difference is on the basis of their focal objects. Now, it's not saying that the 3 types of compassion, what is their focal object? All sentient beings, right? They're the same, and that's all sentient beings. But sentient beings have taken on a different meaning if you conjoin it with the understanding of the impermanence of all sentient beings. Let me give you an example. If I meet someone, let's say I meet Kumbin for the first time, my mind perceives Kumbin. If I have compassion for Kumbin, then I focus on Kumbin and wish her to be free from suffering. But then as I get to know Kumbin, I know more about her. Now every time I think of Kumbin, yeah, Kumbin appears to my mind. without thinking of all the characteristics that I got to know. I can think of them on other occasions, but as I'm practicing compassion, focusing on her, yes, it's Kumpen appearing to my mind, but my sense of Kumpen has changed, hasn't it? Because I know more about her. I know more about her. So the more you know about another person, when this person appears to your mind, there is a difference, isn't there? Or let me give you another example. You have a tree in your garden, right? You move into this new house, there's a tree. It's 10 meters, 15 meters away from the building. And you look at it all the time from that distance. You haven't gone closer to really look at it. So when you think of that tree, it's always that tree from a particular distance. But you may go closer and find out a lot more about that tree, right? So it's still the same tree that you're thinking of when you're, I mean, you may have taken on a different perspective, okay, like close up or something. That's how it may appear. So then it's slightly different. But in actuality, it's the tree. So you know a little bit more about it. You've learned more about it. Other people told you more about it. So it still appears as the same tree, but it's different. Does that make sense? So the object is the tree, but the quality of that object has changed. Similarly, if I don't reflect on sentient being suffering, sentient beings' impermanence, just on a daily basis, because we have this view of holding on to permanence, right? Therefore, that's a very powerful misperception. It's a very powerful misperception. So not every time I have compassion, let's say, okay, so I'm an advanced practitioner. I have realized that sentient beings are impermanent. I have even realized that they lack inherent existence. I have realized that, which means I can now generate all three types of compassion. The first type, which it's not conjoined with the understanding of the impermanence of sentient beings, and it's not conjoined with the understanding of the emptiness of sentient beings. It's not conjoined with any of these. It just focuses on the suffering of sentient beings without being conjoined with these two minds. So after I realized emptiness and after I realized the lack of inherent existence, how can my compassion not always be conjoined with these two minds? You may wonder, right? How can they not? Now I know. Why? Because I still have grasping onto inherent. I still have a mind grasping at permanence. I still have a mind that grasps at inherent existence. And so when these are more active, that understanding of impermanence and that understanding of emptiness may not come to the forefront. Am I making sense? We think that, possibly some people think that, once you realize emptiness, you never hold on to inherent existence any longer. That's not true. That's impossible. There are, of course, certain situations where you have a wrong view. Understanding the opposite takes care of that mind. For instance, if I believe there's a monster in my closet, right? For weeks I was convinced there's this monster living in my closet, or someone, I don't know, some rapist, whatever. And then I open the door, no one in there, and that's it. The mind no longer arises. I've seen it with my own eyes. There's nothing in there, right? Or I thought there was mold in there, whatever, and I look at it and like, there's no way there's mold in there. So that wrong view that there is something in there, when in actuality it's not there, it will no longer arise. Yes. Why in that case? Why in that case that wrong view's gone right away with perceiving the opposite of what it previously perceived? Why? Why is it gone right away? What do you think?
Because we have a direct perception.
Because you have a direct perception.
You see there is a monster.
So if you have a direct perception of impermanence and a direct perception of emptiness, does that mean you never hold on to, you never have ignorance again? Because you have a direct perception. So a direct perception, that in itself is not enough. What is the difference? In both cases, you directly realize that all sentient beings, that whatever exists lacks inherent existence. Once you reach the path of seeing, you directly realize emptiness. However, despite that direct realization of emptiness, you still have minds that pop up later on that hold on to the inherent existence of things. While in the case of the example I gave, that's not true.
We still have the appearances, is that the implication?
You still have ignorance.
The appearance. We still
The
have appearances.
the appearances are different, but you still hold on to.
But we don't believe the appearances anyhow.
Belief, you still have ignorance that actively apprehends inherent existence. You still have, every now and then, if I were to ask you, do you believe inherent existence? You say no. Right? You don't believe, but believing and just apprehending are two different things. Believing is like not as strong as conviction, but since you've realized emptiness, it's not like there's any doubt in your mind that phenomena lack inherent existence. But there's still, every now and then, a mind pops up called ignorance, is described as ignorance, holding on to inherent existence, grasping at inherent existence. Why?
Forgetting.
Because you're forgetting. No. Forgetting, I mean, the mind is not that strong. It still pops up. You could say that your realization of emptiness is not strong enough yet. It's not an exact forgetting. But why is that the case, although you realized emptiness directly?
Because our training, past training, like Bhakti, I think.
Because we've had that grasping at inherent existence and its imprint since beginning's time. Because we've had it for so long. We haven't had a mind that holds on to mold in a cupboard or, that's a wrong view. That's not like, hasn't controlled all our actions since beginning this time. No, this is pretty superficial. Can be easily, no, this is really, goes deep onto, like, on every level in our mind, not on the very subtle level. It doesn't affect the subtlest level of our mind, but many of even the subtler levels that are not active while we're awake, while we're dreaming and so forth, they're still affected by that misperception. Yeah. And that's why it's so strong. It's such a strong mind that even though you realize emptiness conceptually, and even if you realize it directly, once you rise from that meditative state, they can still pop up.
But why? I don't understand the why.
Because we're so accustomed to them. We have imprints. It's
But
just...
you see the
Yeah, but you don't see, no, but you don't see it in every moment. The direct realization into emptiness. It's not like you walk into a vegetable store and suddenly you realize emptiness directly. It doesn't work like that. It's a meditative absorption, right? It's like, let's be quiet, be in a quiet space. It's like, it needs an incredible effort, especially initially, to enter into that absorption. And while you're in that absorption, only emptiness appears to your mind. But when you rise from that, we still have these imprints that come back.
Like a wave.
Like a wave, if you like. Yes, like a wave. I mean, there's still afflictions. They pop up every now and then. Karma ripens, something happens. Yeah. So it's not like for us ordinary beings. It's very, very different. However, the fact that ignorance still arises, yeah, that goes a long way. Until the 8th ground. You no longer have ignorance when you achieve what is called the 8th ground of a bodhisattva. That's when you've totally eliminated any form of ignorance. So from then onwards, you can no longer have the mind that perceives inherent existence. From then onwards, your compassion is no longer the first type, where it's not conjoined with the understanding of emptiness. Right? But you can have, even though you realized emptiness directly, you can have compassion that is not influenced by your understanding of emptiness or your understanding of impermanence. When, for instance, the opposite of these two minds, or it's not the opposing force of these two minds. What is the opposing force to the mind that perceives the impermanence of things? The mind that holds on to their permanence. What is the opposing force to the mind that realizes emptiness? The mind that holds on to inherent existence. Right? So these two minds, when they are very active, you may still generate compassion, but in that moment, you don't first generate the understanding of sentient beings, lack of permanence or lack of inherent existence. And when they're conjoined with compassion, when that doesn't arise, then your compassion is the first type of compassion. Does that make sense? It's the first type. It's not conjoined either with the understanding of impermanence or the understanding of emptiness. So you can still have the first type. The second type is, yes, it's conjoined with the understanding of impermanence, and the third type is conjoined with the understanding of emptiness. Is that? I mean, that's how usually the three types are explained. It's influenced by the understanding of impermanence, or by the understanding of the impermanence of sentient beings, and it's conjoined with the understanding of the emptiness of sentient beings. Right? Does that make sense? So these are the three types. Yeah, so therefore they're on the basis of their focal objects, the way sentient beings are now perceived, or it's not really that sentient beings, it's still sentient beings, just sentient beings wanting for all sentient beings to be free from suffering. But the fact that what is conjoined or what influences this compassion is the understanding of the impermanence of sentient beings, the quality is different. The quality of that focal object is different. Although it doesn't appear differently, it's just sentient beings, but it is influenced by the mind it is conjoined with, and therefore it makes that compassion more powerful. Does that make sense? It makes it more powerful. It influences it. All right. Now this is maybe new for some of you. This idea of some mind conjoined with another mind, but this is huge. I mean, it comes up again and again when you practice, or when you study this. Sorry, when you study this, this is again and again mentioned. Okay, so there was another question. Oh, sorry, Abhishek, I haven't answered this question. It would take too long. Then Hannele, she asked, are abiding and existing basically referring to the same thing? Yes. Yes, they are. If a flower abides, it necessarily exists? Yes. And if a flower exists, it necessarily abides? Yes. Just a different word. In Tibetan, they say neba. Yeah, neba, as it's a verb. And then you have yuba. It's actually also a verb, but you don't have the three times, for instance. I don't know how they look at it grammatically. Yeah, I think it's... Or is it an adjective? Yeah, I think it's an adjective, sorry. It's yuba as in like existent. Yeah, so existent, I think it's not a verb. It's an adjective, whereas abide is a verb in Tibetan. But they mean the same thing. Can it be that the imprints look for conditions to hold to the afflictions? Look for conditions to hold on to. The imprints look for conditions to hold to the afflictions. I don't think they look for conditions for... No, I don't think they look for them specifically. It's not like that. But I think the imprints are responsible for the afflictions to pop up again. Like if there's strong imprints for anger, for instance, we're much more likely to get angry in a certain situation, right? If we didn't have these strong imprints, then in a similar situation, we wouldn't get angry. All right, I need to leave it at that. Sorry, I've been too chatty. Okay, next time we'll continue to read a little bit more. Yeah, this is enough for all the chattiness. Next time we go a little bit more through the text and focus more on that. Okay. Anyway, all that's left is to dedicate all the positive potential we've accumulated today. Once again, to dedicate it, whatever positive potential, dedicating it towards our own enlightenment. Thinking, may this become a cause for us to quickly generate great compassion, bodhicitta, and then accumulate all the merit and wisdom we need to eventually become a fully enlightened Buddha for the benefit of all sentient beings. But may it also cause our precious lamas, like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and so many other beings who embody the teachings to have a long and healthy life. And may it lastly cause all the conflicts in this world. May cause the sentient beings who are responsible for all these conflicts to find more love and compassion for others in their heart and reduce their hatred and attachment. So with this in mind, let's recite the dedication prayers. In the snow-encircled land, you are the source of benefit and bliss. Avalokiteshvara Tenzin Gyatso, please remain in life until samsara ends. The brave Manjushri and also Samantabhadra realize things as they are. Hence, in order to be able to follow their example, I dedicate these merits in the best way. With the dedication praised the Supreme by the victorious ones of the 3 times, I completely dedicate all these roots of virtue so that I might engage in the noble bodhisattva deeds. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. Okay, thank you.